Oh my gosh, the Air India report is out and this is insane. Literally one of the pilots asking, why did you cut off the engine fuel switches? And another responding saying that they did not. What happened here? The preliminary report on Air India 171 that killed nearly 300 people on the 787-8 Boeing Dreamliner is out, and it is a doozy. First of all, some quick notes. We got to get this out of the way right away. Fuel was tested, found substantially acceptable. The aircraft achieved a maximum speed of 180 knots, and then engine 1 and engine 2 fuel, with about a 1 second difference between the two switches, were moved from run to cutoff. There was no indication of any issue before that, and all of a sudden the switches were moved from run to cutoff. As we've already explained, as a jet pilot, these are not switches that accidentally switch from run to cutoff. You can only purposefully move them to cutoff. But there does not appear to be a CAS message, a bird strike issue, a fuel contamination issue. It doesn't look like there was anything wrong at all, other than what started this, all of a sudden a switch of both of the engines moving from run to cutoff. One pilot's heard asking, why did he cut it off? And the other saying he did not. Now the relights started working. We got a decel in both of the engines, and both of the engines were starting to relight. Engine 2 was starting to come back alive. Sorry, engine 1 was starting to come back alive, reversing that deceleration of engine speed, both of them getting down below idle, and then engine 2 did not relight. Now that gives you a very, very quick overview, but now I'm gonna go into the actual report so you can see exactly where these items are. And I just wanna get you started with some of the most important information because I value your time. And let's get into this. Look at this. The aircraft ground sensors, upon rotation speed was achieved at 155 knots. It was achieved at 8:08:35 UTC. The aircraft ground sensors transitioned to air mode, consistent with liftoff 4 seconds later. Now, there was some talk that potentially there could have been a sensor failure that indicated the plane was on the ground, and that potentially then the engine set to a reversionary FADEC or thrust mode to relax that thrust back to idle. But that is not apparently what happened based on the preliminary report. This preliminary report indicates that the aircraft achieved a maximum recorded airspeed of 180 knots. And immediately thereafter, after hitting 180 knots, so about 7 seconds after rotation, the engine 1 and engine 2 fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run to cutoff with a time gap of 1 second between each other. In other words, just enough time to go click, click. Engine N1 and N2 began to decelerate from their takeoff values as fuel supply to the engines was cut off. In the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other, why did he cut off? The other pilot responded that he did not do so. Did these switches magically shut off? Or is this a case of the pilot who rotated the aircraft potentially losing sight of the center console of the aircraft, which is entirely normal, mind you, and all of a sudden the other pilot, so likely the right seat pilot, switching that fuel cutoff valve to the off position while the pilot rotating the aircraft is focused on flying. This is very normal, by the way. In case you haven't seen my videos on this before, here is a video that I posted on YouTube. I called it the dangerous jet landing. And I show how a typical takeoff progresses. And this is sort of just on runway 26 here, coming out of Camarillo. And we can go ahead and give it a play just so you can get a little bit of an idea. But the goal is,
honestly, they've lost their...
Whoops, that's a lot going on in the background. The goal is for you to see this movement of my hands from the yoke with one hand and the throttle with the other hand to both hands on the yoke. That's the most critical part. Here we go.
All right, airspeed allowed 3 ways.
70?
Check.
See that helicopter coming over? That's what I was worried about.
Hey, V1, rotate. The helicopter's no factor.
See, my hands are both hands move over to the yoke. At that moment, I'm focused on, I've got a helicopter for traffic that I'm watching for. I've got to focus on my speeds to make sure I don't stall the plane, to make sure I'm climbing appropriately. Are we achieving a positive rate? Are our engine parameters working? I'm not paying attention to that fuel switch because nobody ever touches it.
I got that helicopter in sight, no factor. I'm going to start turning left though.
Helicopter 605 north.
Helicopter no factor, I say.
Okay, flap up.
The option north pass, 605 meter. Checking 97 Mike, right down approved, runway 26, clear for takeoff, caution wake turbines for the departure Pino.
Runway 26,
traffic.
approved.
Yeah, you're clear. No factor.
Okay, with the takeoff.
There's the traffic advisory, right? We were way ahead of that helicopter. I had eyes on him from when we started rolling. We get the traffic warning. We already expect that it's going to come, right? We're ahead of the aircraft in this example. But the point is, where I am not looking is at that center control area where you have these fuel cutoff switches. This is not a place that you're actually going to be looking down as the pilot rotating the aircraft. So it's very, very easy for somebody else, I mean, if there's a third person in the cockpit to do it, didn't seem like this was likely, but for a second pilot to flip these switches, lifting them over their guard brackets and down and shutting both of these off. Now, this is no longer speculation. This is what the report is saying. The preliminary report is telling us that there were no CAS messages, at least that they're telling us, unless that they're leaving out information here that there was an engine failure or a CAS message or some kind of crew alerting message, right? CAS stands for Crew Alerting System. We don't have any of that. What we actually have here is we rotated, 7 seconds later, somebody moved the fuel switches to cut off, and then one of the pilots goes, "Why did you do that?" And the other goes, "I didn't do it." To me, this doesn't look good, especially since the report is recommending no actions for Boeing or GE, which is what we assumed when I covered this 3 days ago. A lot of people got mad at me, but I said, it is a sign that Boeing and GE have not come out with a statement yet, because if there was a problem with the planes or the engines, other aircraft would already be getting updates or retrofits or changes. This means Boeing and GE probably looked and go, we'll let you guys reveal this one, but that looks like it smells a little fishy. Which is absolutely terrible for the point of view that one person could basically do this. To an aircraft, I mean, at this point, likely maliciously. We still don't know. Maybe for some reason, these switches just happen to fall to the off position, which seems very unlikely, but leave that as a possibility. It is worth remembering the checklist, by the way, for a dual engine failure on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner is memory item 1, fuel control switches both to cut off then run. Number 2, ram air turbine switch push and hold. Maybe why we got that ram air turbine deployed. We did get these switches moved back to the run position after all, and we did end up getting relight. Footage shows the ram air turbine getting deployed, no significant bird activity noticed. Aircraft started to lose altitude before crossing the airport. Here's the rat in the extended positioning, position. This is not a surprise. We've known this for a while. We've also seen the rat providing hydraulic power. We also see that the engine 1 fuel cutoff switch then transitioned from cutoff to run at about 52 seconds. Now, 52 seconds would be about 10 seconds after the cutoff. So within 10 seconds, we get these moved back to 10. Or to run 10 seconds later. The APU inlet door began opening about 2 seconds later, consistent with the APU start logic. So basically the APU turning on or initiating its procedure to enable air intake and then also enable these engines to start. So we see the inlet door opening and the start logic for the APU, auxiliary power unit, begin to operate. Engine 2 fuel cutoff switch 4 seconds later moved from cutoff to run. Remember, engine 1 was able to stop the deceleration of the turbine speed, but engine 2 did not have enough time. So the engines worked as appropriately. They were turned off And then when the main pilot flying realized, he turned them back on, and they both relit just fine. The FADEX automatically managed the relight and the thrust recovery sequence with ignition and fuel introduction. So the engines did function. This is where we talk about we could not arrest this speed deceleration for engine 2 inside the turbines. Then about 10 seconds after we move these switches, is actually 13 seconds, here it is, 13 seconds after we move the switches back to run again, one of the pilots transmits Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. ATC inquired about a call sign, did not get a response, but then activated emergency response. Progress of the investigation, the drone photos they took, so blah, blah, blah. This is essentially the initial report. They talk about the damage, where the damage is located, the microphones that they're collecting, the cockpit voice recorders, the time frames for all of these sequences that occurred, the weather. They called weather not significant. They called fuel not significant. Here were the fuel switches, which were moved back into the run position. However, this is very consistent with the leaked reporting that we heard. Here's the APU inlet door. This is very consistent with the reporting that we heard that for some reason, these switches were moved to the off position, and it's unclear why. And based on this report, we can see, yes, for some reason, right here, without any kind of warning or error or bird strike or catastrophe, for some reason, somehow the fuel switches transitioned to cutoff. And I hate to say it, but it is getting glaringly more likely now that this was indeed a case of terrorism. And it is terrible to think about this. And I feel so terrible for all the people who lost their lives in this. And the problem is, this isn't even one of those times where we can look and say, what can we learn from this? You know, I mean, mental health, they were breathalyzed before they started their shift, the report says. Everything checked out, the crew was deemed fit. And so what do we learn? Well, somebody had a mental health problem. Well, we already know that. Many people have mental health problems. It's absolutely terrible. So it's very frustrating that this is what we're left with. But there you go. The Air India 171 preliminary report. If you find yourself needing life insurance, check out our sponsor, metkevin.com/life. That's metkevin.com/life. It's a paid sponsor of the channel. You can get life insurance in as little as 5 minutes. It's the same one Lauren and I use. Thanks so much for watching.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.